Hello everyone. I hope you really enjoy the story. I will never forget the first time I saw Rachel. It was the kind of moment that feels like it belongs in a movie. I was 27, living in a new city, and completely unsure of where my life was headed. She walked into the bookstore where I worked part-time, her auburn hair catching the sunlight streaming through the glass doors. She was a vision of confidence and curiosity, glancing through the shelves like she was on the hunt for something specific. I was supposed to be restocking that afternoon, but instead, I found myself lingering by the counter, watching her. She finally noticed and flashed me a quick smile that practically stopped my heart. "Do you know where I can find something on photography?" she asked, holding up an old paperback on travel as if it were evidence. "Yeah, absolutely," I stammered, leading her to the right section. That quick interaction turned into a conversation about art, travel, and life. She had this laugh that was both contagious and comforting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely at ease. Before I knew it, she walked out with a couple of books and my phone number scribbled on a receipt. Rachel wasn't just beautiful. She was magnetic, the kind of person who could make a stranger feel like an old friend within minutes. When she texted me later that night, asking if I wanted to grab coffee sometime, I didn't hesitate. Our first date was the kind of night you dream about. We sat at a corner cafe, drinking lattes and talking for hours about everything from our childhoods to our big, wild dreams. She told me she wanted to travel the world, capturing moments through her camera lens. I told her about my half-finished novel and how I felt stuck between ambition and fear. By the time we walked out of the cafe, I was hooked. Rachel was the type of person who could light up a room without trying. Being around her made me feel like anything was possible. We moved fast, falling into an intense rhythm that felt like the only pace we knew. Within 6 months, we were practically inseparable. Those first few months with Rachel were electric. We spent late nights dancing in the living room to old records, made spontaneous road trips to nowhere, and talked about the future as if it was already written in the stars. She made me feel like the best version of myself, and for a while, I believed we were unstoppable. But looking back now, I wonder if we burned too brightly, too quickly. Being with Rachel felt like stepping into a world where nothing else mattered. Everything about her fascinated me. The way she talked, the way she moved, even the little quirks she probably didn't realize she had. She had this habit of biting her lip when she was thinking, and every time she did it, I felt my heart race like I was some kind of teenager with a crush. I wanted to know everything about her. Every story she had, every dream she held onto, every scar she hid from the world. And Rachel wasn't the type to hold back either. She had this fearless way of opening up, like she trusted me with parts of herself she didn't show anyone else. "I've always felt like I don't belong anywhere," she told me one night, her head resting on my shoulder as we lay on my couch. "That's why I love photography. It's like, even if I don't fit in, I can capture the world as it is. Make it mine for just a moment." I remember brushing a strand of hair out of her face and kissing her forehead. "You belong with me," I said softly. Sounded corny even to me, but in that moment it was the only thing I knew to be true. She smiled at me then, this soft, almost shy smile that made my chest ache in the best way. Rachel wasn't just my girlfriend. She was my muse, my obsession, my everything. She had a way of pulling me into her world, making me forget about the mundane routines of life. She'd show up at my apartment with a bottle of wine and 2 cameras, insisting we wander the city at midnight to find the beauty in shadows. And every time I'd go, because how could I not? One night, after hours of wandering through dimly lit streets and snapping photos of neon signs and empty alleys, we ended up by the river. She sat on the edge of the dock, her feet dangling over the water, and turned her camera on me. "Hold still," she said, her voice playful but focused. "Why me? There's nothing special here," I joked, half smiling. She looked at me through the lens, her eyes narrowing like she was trying to capture something invisible. "You're wrong," she murmured. "You're the most fascinating thing I've ever seen." I didn't know how to respond to that. It was like she saw something in me I couldn't see myself. We kissed then, under the glow of streetlights and the hum of the city in the background. It wasn't just a kiss. It was a promise, a declaration, an unspoken agreement that we would be everything to each other. And for a while we were. The passion we shared was intoxicating, the kind of love that kept you up at night, that made you forget about the rest of the world. I'd wake up to her tracing the lines of my face with her fingertips, or feel her slip out of bed just to photograph the sunrise from the window. Every moment with Rachel felt like a story waiting to be told. But even then, in those perfect nights and reckless days, there was a small part of me that wondered, could a fire like this ever burn forever? Rachel and I created a bubble that felt untouchable, a world where only the two of us existed. The rest of life, work, responsibilities, even our friends, seemed to blur into the background. It was not that we didn't care about anything else. It was that nothing else seemed to matter as much as we did. She had this incredible way of turning the mundane into magic. A lazy Sunday morning wasn't just a chance to sleep in. It was an excuse to make breakfast together, dancing barefoot in the kitchen to old Motown records. A trip to the grocery store became an adventure when she made me close my eyes and pick ingredients at random, promising we'd create something genius out of whatever I grabbed. And when we traveled, it was like she came alive in a way I'd never seen. She'd pack her camera bag with an almost frantic excitement, filling it with extra film, notebooks, and little trinkets she said brought her good luck. I can still see the way her eyes lit up when we stood on the cliffs of Big Sur, the Pacific Ocean roaring beneath us. She snapped photo after photo, laughing at how the wind whipped her hair into a frenzy. "Stop taking pictures for a second," I said, wrapping my arms around her waist. She turned to me, grinning. "Why?" "Because this moment's perfect as it is," I whispered. She dropped her camera and leaned into me, her smile softening as the sun dipped low on the horizon. We stood there like that for what felt like forever, just holding each other as the world around us turned gold. But it was not just the grand moments that made me fall deeper. It was the little things. The way she'd sneak handwritten notes into my jacket pockets, or how she'd stay up late listening to me read passages from the novel I was too scared to finish. Rachel had this way of making me feel like I could do anything, like I was unstoppable as long as she was by my side. And yet, there was a restlessness in her that I didn't fully understand back then. She had this need to keep moving, to keep finding the next big thing. It was as if she was always searching for something she couldn't quite put into words. One night, as we lay tangled together in bed, I asked her about it. "What are you chasing, Rach?" She tilted her head, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. "I'm not sure," she admitted, "but I feel like if I stop looking, I'll lose something important." "Do you know what I mean?" I nodded, even though I didn't completely get it. I figured it was just another part of who she was, this whirlwind of curiosity and ambition that made her so magnetic. But sometimes, I wondered if I was enough to keep her grounded. For the first couple of years, Rachel and I lived in a kind of blissful haze. We had this rhythm, this unspoken understanding, that made everything between us feel effortless. But looking back now, I realized that maybe it was too effortless. Maybe we were so caught up in the magic that we missed the cracks starting to form beneath the surface. It was subtle at first. Little things. Rachel started staying out later than usual, her excuses vague but delivered with that easy confidence of hers. "Just a late night editing photos with Greg," she'd say, or, "I lost track of time walking around the city." At first, I did not think much of it. Rachel was always spontaneous, always chasing inspiration, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who questioned her every move. But then there were the times she'd leave her phone face down on the table or get quiet when certain messages popped up. One evening, as we were having dinner, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it quickly and slid it into her pocket, her smile faltering just slightly. "Who's that?" I asked casually, trying to mask the flicker of unease in my voice. "Oh, just Greg," she said, a little too quickly. I nodded, forcing myself to let it go, but that uneasy feeling lingered. Greg was her photography partner, someone I'd met a handful of times. He was harmless, I told myself, just a friend who shared her creative world in a way I couldn't. But something felt off. There was another night when she came home late, her cheeks flushed and her hair slightly disheveled. Sorry, babe, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. Lost track of time again. Her lips tasted like wine, and I noticed the faintest trace of cologne on her jacket. One that didn't belong to me. Did you go out with Greg again? I asked, keeping my tone light. She hesitated, just for a moment, before nodding. Yeah, we had a couple of drinks after finishing up at the studio. You don't mind, do you? Of course not, I said, even as my stomach churned. That night, as she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind raced with questions I didn't want to ask. Was I imagining things? Was I being paranoid? Or was there something Rachel wasn't telling me? I wanted to believe in her, to trust the woman I had fallen in love with. But the longer I lay there, the harder it became to ignore the doubt creeping into my chest. It wasn't until a week later that my suspicions grew sharper. I came home early from work one afternoon, planning to surprise her with her favorite takeout and a rare bottle of wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. The apartment was unusually quiet when I walked in, the only sound coming from her studio at the back of the hall. I knocked lightly on the door before stepping inside. Rachel! She jumped, nearly dropping her camera. Her face was flushed, and her laptop screen snapped shut so fast I barely had time to register what was on it. Hey! She said, her voice a little too bright. What are you doing home so early? Wanted to surprise you, I said slowly, setting the bag of food on her desk. Everything okay? Yeah, of course, she said, brushing her hair behind her ear. But her hands were trembling, and she couldn't quite meet my eyes. I didn't press her then, but the moment stuck with me. Something wasn't right, and no matter how much I tried to push the thought aside, it only grew stronger. For the first time in our relationship, I felt the cold grip of doubt. That lingering unease gnawed at me for days, like an itch I couldn't scratch. Rachel carried on as if everything was normal, but I started noticing more little things. Details that didn't add up, moments that felt out of place. One evening, as we sat on the couch, her phone buzzed again. She reached for it instinctively, then hesitated, letting it vibrate against the table. I glanced at the screen. The name Greg flashed briefly before she swiped the notification away, almost as if she didn't want me to see it. Work stuff? I asked, keeping my tone casual. Yeah, she said quickly, her smile a little too forced. Just brainstorming for an upcoming shoot. But it wasn't just the messages. There were times I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone with an intensity that made me wonder who, or what, she was so invested in. One Saturday, I decided to test the waters. How about we go out tonight? I asked over breakfast. Dinner? Drinks? Maybe even some dancing? Rachel hesitated, stirring her coffee a little too long before answering. I'd love to, but I told Greg I'd help him set up for a shoot tomorrow morning. I should probably call it an early night. Greg again, I said, trying to sound teasing, but the bitterness slipped into my voice anyway. You two seem to be spending a lot of time together lately. Her head snapped up, her eyes narrowing just slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, backing off. Just an observation. She didn't respond, but the tension between us hung thick in the air. That night, I couldn't let it go. As she got ready to leave, I lingered in the doorway, watching her apply lipstick in the mirror. You're really dressed up for an early night, I said, forcing a smile. Rachel paused, meeting my eyes in the reflection. It's just habit, she said lightly, brushing off my comment. But the way she avoided my gaze told me there was more to it. After she left, I sat alone in the apartment, the silence almost deafening. My mind raced with questions I couldn't answer, scenarios I didn't want to imagine. Finally, I gave in to the nagging doubt and picked up her laptop, the same one she had snapped shut that day in her studio. It took me a few tries to guess her password, but when the screen unlocked, I felt a pang of guilt that was quickly swallowed by curiosity. Her email was open, and at first I didn't see anything unusual. But as I scrolled through the messages, a name caught my eye. Not Greg, but Tyler. Who the hell was Tyler? The most recent email was dated just a few days ago. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Hey, Rachel. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about the way you laughed when the waiter spilled that drink on you. I'm counting the days until I see you again. There was more, but I couldn't read it. My vision blurred as my mind tried to make sense of what I was seeing. I scrolled further, opening another message from 2 weeks earlier. I hope Greg doesn't suspect anything. You're worth the risk, though. You always will be. I slammed the laptop shut, my chest tight with anger and disbelief. Tyler, not Greg. This whole time it wasn't even Greg. My world was spinning. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was misreading the messages, maybe it wasn't what it seemed. But deep down I knew the truth. Rachel wasn't just hiding something from me. She was betraying me. And the worst part? She was so damn good at it that I hadn't seen it coming. When Rachel came home that night, I was waiting. Rachel walked through the door, humming softly to herself, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She seemed lighter than usual, almost glowing. For a second, I wondered if I could stomach playing dumb, pretending I didn't know. But then I remembered the words in Tyler's email, and the anger surged back. Hey, she said, dropping her bag on the counter. You're up late. I didn't respond right away. I sat at the kitchen table, gripping a half-empty glass of whiskey, watching her move around the room like nothing was wrong. She finally noticed the tension, her smile fading as her eyes met mine. What's wrong? She asked, her voice cautious. What's wrong? I repeated, my voice steady but laced with bitterness. I don't know, Rachel. You tell me. Who the hell is Tyler? Her face went pale. For a moment, she froze, like she didn't know whether to run or fight. Then, she plastered on a weak smile, trying to regain control. Tyler? He's just a friend. A friend, I said, standing up and slamming the glass down on the table. Does your friend know you're married? Or does he think Greg is the only obstacle he has to worry about? Her eyes widened and she took a step back. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Rachel, I snapped. I read the emails. Last night was incredible? You're worth the risk? How long has this been going on? Her hands flew to her face, her composure crumbling as tears welled up in her eyes. It's not what you think, she stammered. Then what is it, Rachel? I demanded, my voice rising. Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like you've been lying to me for months. She sat down at the edge of the couch, burying her face in her hands. It was a mistake, she said finally, her voice muffled. I didn't mean for it to happen. I stared at her, my chest heaving with anger and disbelief. Didn't mean for what to happen? Meeting him? Sleeping with him? Lying to me every time you left this house? Her sobs grew louder, and for a split second, I felt a flicker of pity. But it was drowned out by the betrayal coursing through me. I swear, she choked out. It didn't mean anything. It was stupid and it's over. It's been over for weeks. I laughed bitterly, the sound foreign to my own ears. Over? Rachel, he emailed you 2 days ago. Does that sound like it's over to you? She looked up at me then, her face streaked with tears, her lips trembling as she struggled to find the right words. But there was nothing she could say to undo what she'd done. Why? I asked finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this to us? To me? She shook her head, her shoulders trembling. I don't know, she whispered. I got lost, I guess. It was never about you, I swear. I felt like I was losing myself, and Tyler made me feel. Made you feel what? I cut in sharply. Alive? Seen? Loved? Wasn't I enough? You are enough, she cried. You've always been enough. This isn't your fault. It's mine. I don't even know who I am anymore. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, and for a moment, all the anger drained out of me, leaving only the ache of her betrayal. This woman, the one I had built my life around, had let someone else into the space that was supposed to be ours. I don't know if I can forgive this, I said finally, my voice cracking. Her sobs grew quieter, and she reached out as if to touch me, but I stepped back. The distance between us felt like a canyon, impossible to bridge. "Where do we go from here, Rachel?" I asked, the weight of the question suffocating me. She didn't answer, and for the first time since we met, I felt like I didn't know her at all. The days that followed were a blur of silence and distance. Rachel and I shared the same space, but it was as if we were living in different worlds. I couldn't bring myself to leave just yet, but staying felt like torture. She tried to reach out, cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes on my desk, and even pulling out the old record player we used to dance to. But none of it felt real anymore. The weight of what she had done hung between us, suffocating any chance of reconciliation. One evening, as I sat in the living room staring blankly at the TV, Rachel stood in the doorway, clutching a mug of tea. "We need to talk," she said softly. "I don't know what there's left to say," I replied, not looking at her. "Please just listen," she said, sitting down across from me. "I know I've broken your trust. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to fix. But I want to try. I love you, Mike. I don't want to lose us." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I almost believed her. But then the image of Tyler's emails flashed in my mind, and the anger returned. "If you loved me," I said, my voice cold, "you wouldn't have betrayed me in the first place." She flinched as if I'd struck her, but I didn't stop. "I can't keep doing this, Rachel. Pretending that things can go back to the way they were. You broke us." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt nothing. I got up and walked to the bedroom, leaving her alone with her guilt. A week later, I decided I needed to get away. The walls of our apartment felt like they were closing in on me, and every glance at Rachel was another reminder of what we'd lost. I booked a cabin in the mountains, a place we talked about visiting but never did. As I packed my bag, Rachel stood in the doorway, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small. "I need some space," I said simply. "For how long?" "I don't know." The drive to the cabin was both liberating and agonizing. I wanted to leave the pain behind, but I couldn't stop thinking about the life we'd built together, now in ruins. At the cabin, I spent the first 2 days in isolation, hiking during the day and staring at the stars at night. It gave me time to think, to process, but also to question everything. Did Rachel's betrayal mean the end of us, or was there a chance we could rebuild? On the third day, I decided to call her. My heart pounded as I dialed her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, nothing. A sinking feeling settled in my chest as I realized I hadn't checked in with her since I left. When I returned to the apartment that evening, I found it eerily quiet. Rachel's things were gone, her clothes, her books, even the photo albums we'd made together. On the counter, there was a letter. "Mike, I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve it. But I know I can't stay here, hoping for something you may never be ready to give. I'll always love you, but I need to figure out who I am, just like you do. Rachel." I dropped the letter, my chest tightening as the finality of her words sank in. She was gone. In the weeks that followed, I tried to adjust to life without Rachel. The apartment felt hollow, the silence deafening. I threw myself into work, spending long hours at the office just to avoid going home. One night, as I was scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification pop up, an email from Rachel. My heart raced as I opened it. "Mike, I'm writing this from a little cafe in Paris. It's strange. I always thought we'd come here together. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I wanted to thank you for loving me the way you did, for showing me what it means to be seen. I'm sorry I couldn't be what you deserved. I hope someday you find the peace and happiness you gave me. Rachel." I stared at the screen, unsure of how to feel. Her words felt sincere, but they also left me with a hollow ache. I had loved her with everything I had, but maybe that wasn't enough. The next morning, I packed up the apartment. I couldn't stay there any longer. It was too full of memories that I couldn't bear to relive. I moved to a smaller place across town, one where I could start fresh. Took months, maybe longer, to find my footing again. There were days when I still thought of Rachel, wondering what she was doing, if she ever thought of me. But with time, the pain softened. I started writing again, pouring my emotions onto the page in a way I hadn't been able to before. Slowly, life began to feel lighter. One afternoon, as I sat in a new cafe, working on my laptop, a woman approached my table. She smiled warmly, holding a book I'd accidentally left behind at the counter. "You forgot this," she said, handing it to me. Our eyes met, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. Thank you for listening to this story. You can subscribe and like this video, as there will be many more interesting stories on this channel.